forever. We're live.
Hey everybody, it's Friday, 3 p.m. That means another episode of Absolutely Fish's Facebook Live. Last week, Glenn dove into the Nano Reef, and because it was after our big sale, we didn't have any Nano Reefs set up. So this week, we're going to do kind of like a part 2 and go a little bit more into detail. I'm starting here at the Fluval Evo 12, which we set up at the beginning of the week. And if you check it out, we actually already have some livestock in here. And today we're going to be setting up our second counter reef. I'm going to give everybody the chance to see kind of how we do it and some of the products we use. Glenn mentioned a few of them, but today we're actually going to be using them. We're going to be setting up the reef on the Facebook Live. It is I kind of got a head start, so the video wasn't going to be too boring for you. The tank's already rocked, the equipment's in place, but we're going to fill the tank and everything. So if you follow these steps and these tips, maybe use some of these products, you can actually get a Nano Reef going with livestock in it a lot faster than a lot of people think. So let's take a walk over here and I'll show you some of the products we're going to use. So here's where I've started us. I didn't want to waste time spending 20 minutes on Facebook Live rocking the tank. So I did kind of a little semicircle, kind of an atoll structure, try to make it interesting and kind of cool. And I actually left this tray here for a reason, because I wanted to show people. I thought about doing it real simple, just 3 pieces of like medium-sized rock, but I just wanted to show that, you know, you can buy a big piece of rock, smash it up with a hammer and a screwdriver and make much more interesting rock work. Give yourself something to be more creative with, rather than just 3 big stones. Now we kind of have something that's a little more interesting to look at, and you know, be creative. So as you can see, we rock this tank directly on the glass. The main reason of doing that is making sure the structure is stable. You don't want to rock your tank on a sand bed, which is obviously a shifting substrate. You have little fish or a shrimp, whatever, digging under your rock work. Next thing you know, you have a rock slide you have to deal with. So always rock your tank directly on the glass. And when you're using smaller pieces of rock like this, you actually do have the option of using some adhesive. Now, I didn't in this case, and I have a feeling that when I start filling this tank, I'm going to wish I did, because the rock's going to start moving around. But when you're using smaller sized pieces of rock, you can either use epoxy or coral glue. Now, if you're going with like medium sized pieces, I would recommend the epoxy. Real small stuff, like pieces like this, you could probably get to stick together with coral glue. Pieces like this, the epoxy is really going to be what you want to go with. The coral glue is really designed for smaller frags and small pieces of rock. So we have a mixture of pieces in here, some medium, some small. I probably would have benefited from adhering them into place, but I didn't have time and I thought about it after the fact, so we'll see. So let's talk briefly about the equipment on this tank. As you can see, we have a couple pieces of equipment going. The light is a Wavepoint blade, which is a simple on and off. It is a dual channel fixture, so you can turn on the whites and the blues independently. However, it's all on one ballast, which means that you can't put the whites and the blues on a different timer. I do like this light. We've done a lot of Nano Reefs in the past with this light. It's real sleek, real clean looking. The only thing it lacks is the programmability that you get with some higher end lights. However, you're paying about, I don't know, half the price that you would for an AI Prime. Additionally on here, here's the Wavepoint blade. I just wanted to show you the box. So it's only $100, not bad, definitely reef capable, and I do like the fact that you can turn on just the actinic so you can enjoy the real colors of those corals. For filtration, we're using really simple, just an 8-gallon Power 10, or Quiet Flow 10, excuse me. Your power filter and your filtration when you're doing a Nano Reef is mainly there for the purposes of water flow, and so you have the option of using a chemical filter media. Other than that, the brunt of the filtration is actually being handled by your live rock. So when you're doing a smaller tank, good live rock and water flow are the fundamentals of keeping the reef stable. So on that note, with the water flow, we do have a small CJ Nano that we're using. This is the one on the tank is actually the Nano 1, 200 gallons per hour. It's going to provide some nice water flow. You can see I've directed it towards the live rock. When you have more water flow going through the rock, it acts as a more effective filter, which is what you really want. You want good flow through the rock so the bacteria is aerated, and you also don't have detritus accumulating in your rock, which is what you don't want. Another note, when you're doing your rock work, aside from rocking on the glass, you want to try to keep it relatively open. And by that I mean you don't want like rock on rock on rock on rock, because you want good water flow. You don't want detritus accumulating in pockets, causing problems. So those are some tips to rock your tank and hopefully have a successful foundation for your mini reef. When I do rock tanks, you do it by layer, and you always want to make sure before you move on to the next layer that none of your pieces are shaky, that you have a solid foundation to build on, So it's best if you take your time. It probably took me about half an hour to do this little tank. It's just tweaking, using medium pieces, using smaller pieces to stabilize them to hopefully get like a pretty cool rock work. At least I think so. We also have a protein skimmer on this tank, as you can see. This is a small Fluval C Mini, which does a decent job. Here's the box. Sometimes it helps to actually get your equipment on the tank before you start rocking it. In this case, that Fluval C took up a decent chunk of space, so I had to adjust accordingly. So that's the basics of our base equipment. The main thing is your rock and water flow as your filtration. So let's get started filling this thing up with some sand. If you have the means, even though most sand recommends or it says doesn't need to rinse, if you have the means and you have the water, I'd recommend pre-rinsing your sand. While pretty much all new tanks are going to be cloudy, you can definitely help avoid the cloudiness if you pre-rinse your sand bed. Of course, I got a little sand on the rock work there, because why would it go perfectly smoothly? So we're going to put our sand in. Sometimes using a smaller cup works better for these small reef tanks. Oh, hey Steve.
What's going on, Steve? What's going on, Patricia?
So let's get our sand here. I have about 10 pounds. I don't know if I'm going to use it all or not. We'll see. We'll see how it looks. You guys tell me what you think. Oh, another tip when you're doing your rock work is accessibility. You want to be able to access as much as you can. It's hard not to use the glass as kind of like a structural component of the rock work, as you can see there. But you do want to have as much accessibility as you can when you do the rock work. So we put our sand in as best we can with the rock work. As soon as water goes in here, it's going to kind of be like the great equalizer, so to speak, and the stuff's just going to end up everywhere. Put a little bit in the back. And it's pretty easy to clean the sand off your rock once it's full. You just take like a turkey baster and kind of gently blow it off. Also, the water flow from the filter will kind of help us with that.
Or your hand.
Or your hand. You could just give it a nice little wave.
Those are free.
And feel free to ask any questions as we're doing this, guys. The Nano Reef is not as difficult as it used to be, I'd say for sure. I've done quite a few of them in the last year, 2 years as counter displays, and the main thing is probably water changes, weekly water changes. But if you have a day off, regular day off in the week, and you just know you have your 5 gallons of water ready to go, it's pretty manageable. And you can kind of fit a Nano Reef almost about anywhere. If you have an office or a bedroom, say, hey, I really like something to kind of calm me down, relax me, a mini reef is definitely one of those options. So I'm going to start with that amount of water, or sand rather.
We got a question from Sadie's. Is it better if your sand is wet like that when setting up your aquarium?
That's a good question, Sadie's. Most live sand is packaged wet to preserve the beneficial bacteria. Some are packaged damp. So it probably is easier to work with if it was totally dry, but I don't think you're going to find a live sand that's packaged totally dry.
Probably not.
Probably not. So let's get our water.
And then Sandy shared our video. Thank you, Sandy. We appreciate it.
So I'm cheating a little bit here, guys. I've got 5 gallons of new water, and I actually took 5 gallons of water from one of our existing systems to kind of help accelerate the process. So if you have like a main 75 gallon, whatever, 100 gallon, 180 gallon reef tank, you think about a Nano for your home or office, you can kind of cheat a little bit as long as your system is healthy.
But you have another question.
Oh, okay.
It's from Daniel. How many fish can we put in this tank? This is 10 gallons, I think?
That's a good question, Daniel. It's a 10-gallon tank. You have to choose the right species. So when you come in here and you're walking around a marine fish, you might see an adorable little emperor angel that's about that big. You have to keep in mind that fish is going to get 14, 15 inches minimum. So when we talk about nano species, how many nano species of fish could you fit in here? Meaning fish that probably aren't going to get bigger than an inch, 3, 4, something around that. We do breed our own aquaculture clownfish. You get the baby clowns. We always do the baby clowns in there, but keep in mind they're going to need like a slightly larger tank.
We have another question from Mercedes. Do I have to put the live rock first before putting in the sand bed?
Yes, we did mention earlier if you rewatch or rewind the benefits of putting the rock down first, mainly for stability purposes. You don't want your whole foundation of your tank on a shifting substrate.
Yeah. Especially if you have something like a pistol shrimp in there that likes to burrow underneath the sand bed.
That's exactly right. So, I am going to quickly rinse my container here because we don't want the sand flying everywhere as we fill this tank, so I'm actually going to pour it into the container within the aquarium. That way it kind of spills over as we go and makes less of a mess. I imagine it's still going to be a little bit of a mess, but
it's probably still going to be a mess, knowing how we do things here.
So as I mentioned earlier, I am cheating a little bit using 5 gallons of water from a pre-existing system. Now, obviously you're not always going to have that option if this is your first aquarium, and I would only really recommend ever doing it if the system you're taking the water from is a healthy, stable environment, meaning there's no recent history of sick fish, anything along those lines, and you always want to double check the salinity. So I have one bucket where the salinity is probably about 1.025, and I have another bucket that's probably about 1.020. So my target salinity here is probably somewhere around 1.022 to 1.023. And the reason I like to do my mini reefs at a slightly lower salinity is because evaporation plays a major factor in a smaller aquarium. So when you have a 120 gallon system and you lose, I don't know, let's say 1 or 2 gallons a week in evaporation, your salinity is not making a major jump. But when you have a nano reef and you're losing, I don't know, a liter of water, I don't know if that's an accurate representation. Say you lose a liter of water in a week out of a 10-gallon system, your salinity is going to jump up and be much more affected than it is in the larger aquarium. So if I run my salinity constantly at 1.025, and in the course of a week, the evaporation causes it to jump up, it's going to jump up to 1.027, 1.028. Now, while your invertebrates may not mind that, it does tax your fish. It puts a little bit of stress on them. They have to expend more energy to maintain their internal salinity. So your invertebrates will really do fine at 1.022 to 1.023. That way, when you lose 2 or 3 points to evaporation, you're still within safe ranges.
We have another question from Sadie's, who sounds like she's going to set up her own tank. Is there another way I could use dumping water that's not so messy and prevent my furniture from getting wet?
You could use a small pump, I suppose. You could use a small pump, or you could just be more careful than I'm being. I guess I'm spoiled because I work in the store and there's water going everywhere all the time, but you could definitely use a small pump or power head with some vinyl tubing. Be more precise that way.
Yeah, one thing that I know I did when I first set up my Nano Reef is I actually put a lot of towels down around the area and the furniture that I was setting it up on.
Definitely a good way to go.
Yeah, keep the salt water from getting on the wood and ruining it.
I think probably the best thing to do is just be more careful than I'm being right now.
Yeah, definitely be more careful than Eric.
So, as you can see, this technique works pretty well as far as keeping the water clear.
Barely anything on the water.
I mean, a certain amount of that is because I pre-rinsed the sand, but, you know,
even so, that's really good.
That's pretty good. So, once you get about halfway full, you can kind of pour it into the water column, or a good trick is to pour it onto the rock. That way it gets dispersed throughout, and you're not screwing with your sand bed there. I know this is super exciting. We're filling a tank with water, but we're almost done. Josh, have you ever kept a small tank before?
A Nano Reef, I think they started with a 29-gallon tank.
Okay.
I had a little bit, my tank was bigger than this one, but that still kind of qualifies. For me, a Nano Reef is 30 gallons and under.
I would agree with that. Anything smaller than 10, probably call it Pico Reef.
Yeah. But with these tanks, you can do quite a bit as far as livestock goes. Actually, the little fish sometimes are a little more interesting than some of the bigger guys. Barnacle bunnies, for example, are a big favorite for us here.
Alright, so your tank's full. I don't know how I made sure all the rocks stayed in place, but I guess I did a halfway decent job of rocking the tank. So we're ready to get everything going. So for my mechanical filtration and my chemical filtration, I am choosing to use the stock cartridge that goes with the Aqueon power filter. But in addition, I'm also throwing in a bag of sea gel. Now this product is rated up to 25 gallons. It's basically a blend of a high-grade matrix carbon and a phosphate absorber. So I find with these small tanks, better than the most effective way with keeping them clean is by acting proactively instead of reactively. So instead of starting to pull out your phosphates when you have a hair algae problem or a red slime algae problem, just from day one, be mindful that there are going to be phosphates in your tank no matter what you do. So I'm going to pop that right behind the stock filter. If it fits, there you go. I'm going to make it fit. So that's ready to go. Buckets out of the way.
Don't electrocute yourself.
Try not to electrocute myself. I can't make any promises.
The power filter sucking in water. There it goes.
There we go. So we got the power filter running. Have to swap some plugs around here. Make room for all this. Definitely highly recommend you use a surge protector with your tank.
Uh-oh. There we go. Ooh, man, it's blue light. See if you can put the white on it, flashing it out a little bit on the camera.
Will do. Find it.
There we go. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Power head's on, power filter's on, the light's good. Do we run a skimmer right now, or should we wait to plug it in?
I'm going to wait to plug in the skimmer. I'm going to let the system settle down first so it doesn't go too crazy. Oh, what's up, Chris?
Oh, Chris, what's going on?
So the last couple things I want to talk about before we close out here are some of the liquid additives I use. Now, we recommend this product for any new tank with stability or any other nitrifying bacterial product. We have a lot of bacteria in this tank already with the live sand and the live rock. But you can't really overdose live bacteria, and there's almost no negative side effects of dosing more live bacteria. Whoops, I'm going to try to drop that. Thank you, Chris. So we have a ton of nitrifying bacteria in here anyway, but in order to accelerate the process and get your reef cycled faster, dose a little more. You know, you spend $5-6 on a bottle of bacteria. Let's say you avoid ammonia and nitrite completely, so it's pretty nice. And then the other product I wanted to mention is a probiotic. This is Dr. Tim's Refresh. There are a couple products out there like it. So earlier I talked about being proactive with keeping your tank clean. Aside from the sea gel, I like to use a probiotic bacteria to keep algae down. I find when I use this, you can completely avoid diatom blooms. Typically everyone says, oh, you always get a diatom bloom. And yeah, you will, but if you use probiotics that produce nutrients and fight algae, you can actually avoid that completely, avoid cyanobacteria. And since I've started using probiotics in these counter tanks, I've found that I have been able to avoid all those problems.
And we have one more question from Sadie's. How long does it take to minimize the cloudiness effect of water? If you dump the water in like we did before, use polishing pads and the right filter media, you can clear this up in a few hours, but the next day, this thing will be crystal clear.
Yeah, I have a feeling that probably the steps that we took today to really minimize the clouding, I would say within a few hours this thing will clear up.
Yeah, definitely.
Rinse the sand, you know, be real careful about pouring the water in. Good to go.
tank looks really good.
So I hope you guys benefited from this video. Maybe if you were considering doing a nano reef, maybe this made it a little simpler or made it less scary for you. It's really not that hard. It's really about keeping on top of it, definitely the once a week maintenance, keeping on top of evaporation, definitely using reverse osmosis water. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to comment below or give us a call at the store. Hope to see you guys in and maybe talk about some nano reefs. Thanks for watching, guys.